I'm what you might call the OG, original germaphobe. I've been germ-conscious since long before it was in vogue. I've obsessively washed my hands since before Monk was on the air. I've distanced myself from people since some millennials were in elementary school. So seeing people scrambling to suddenly start exercising proper hygiene and personal space observation is kind of like me watching the rest of the world trying to learn to walk. And with my particular knowledge set, I feel like I can be of help to people. So here's some information, tips, and ideas to help you navigate germ avoidance, which is probably foreign to you, but second nature to me. It pains me beyond words that many people apparently need to be told simply to wash their hands. Washing your hands is one of the most basic tenets of decent hygiene, and is something that should be inextricably interwoven into your day-to-day life, and not something that anyone should ever have to tell you to do. Not only does it protect you, but it is one of the simplest acts of conscientiousness that you can display towards other people. I don't care who you are or how busy you think your life is. You can always make time to wash your hands. And you see 20 seconds a lot of places, but it's not a magic number. It's just kind of a recommendation. Really, when you're washing your hands, you should just kind of know when they're clean. But it is not something to cut corners on. If you feel you need to count while you're washing your hands, then do that. I have counting OCD and actually don't usually count while I'm washing my hands, though I count the number of times I apply soap. And some people have their own unique tricks. My aunt apparently sings happy birthday twice while she's washing her hands to make sure she's cleaned them for a sufficient period of time. But I think if you were doing that every time you're washing your hands, it might drive you around the bend. If washing your hands for a decent amount of time hasn't been part of your life, you might think that it seems really boring. But not only is it a really important thing to do and therefore a worthwhile use of your time, but it actually can be quite calming. It's kind of a mentally relaxing, kind of a zen thing. The sound of running water is kind of calming and it kind of gives you a chance to think. I saw someone ask online recently if a soap was antibacterial. A soap doesn't have to be strong, chemically, or stinging to clean your hands either. I use Ecos. It is an awesome plant-based soap that makes my hands feel wonderfully clean. So while antibacterial might be something you're searching for amid what's going on, it's kind of a marketing tool. And like I said, something does not have to be strong or medicinal in smell to get your hands clean. If your hands are particularly dirty, like you've been working in dirt and you have like visible grime on your hands, or if you feel like you may likely have been in contact with germs, you might want to physically wipe your hands with a coarse surface amid washing them. Like wash your hands once and then take a towel or paper towel and actually physically wipe the surface of your hands and then wash them again. That's not something you regularly need to do when washing your hands. But if you're concerned and feel like you really need to do a major cleaning of your hands, that's one helpful hint. It might not be something you think about usually, or perhaps even now with what's going on, but sink handles are a potential issue with the transference of germs, which seems kind of unfair or ironic, but remember, when someone is starting to use the sink, their hands are dirty. So it's a good idea, especially if you are sharing a sink, or absolutely if you're using a public sink, to use an elbow, a wrist, or paper towel to turn a faucet on. If it is your own personal sink, then that's not so important, but still, if you're washing your hands after using the bathroom or something, you should use your wrist to turn the sink on. If it's your own sink, it doesn't matter when you're turning it off. But for any other sink, use an elbow or something. And if you've been out in public and then come home, do not use the same clothing surface on your home faucet that you did on a faucet in a public bathroom. The same goes for paper towel dispensers and such. If you're going to get a paper towel to turn the sink on or off, make sure it's either hanging down so you can pull it by just the paper towel, or it's an automated paper towel machine. Don't touch handles. And for goodness sakes, never touch bathroom door handles. Some bathrooms are designed so you just have to push the door, but usually one way or the other, there is a handle. It's often on the way in, but still, don't touch public door handles. Use your jacket or shirt or something. And you still don't really want to touch them with gloves, but I'll get into the issue with gloves later. And warm water is optimal, but if you don't have access to warm water, still wash your hands. Now when it comes to drying your hands, you want to try to dry them pretty well. But from a germ perspective, drying your hands is not nearly as important as washing your hands. However, how you dry them is important. You should try to dry your hands. I need to try to be better about drying my hands because washing my hands as much as I do and not drying them all the time, they get very chapped and I get splits in my hands. And not only can that be painful, but if you get splits in your hands, it can also make you more susceptible if you're exposed to germs because you could get germs into your bloodstream through the cracks in your hands. Because I do not leave my home a lot, that's not as big of an issue for me, but still, not great to have cracks in your hands. But as far as drying your hands, if you're using a hand towel or some other kind of reusable cloth, you need to make sure that it is laundered or switched out often because similar to sponges, towels can hold a lot of bacteria. So you don't want to be washing your hands and then putting germs back on them when you dry them. And don't use the same dish towel or whatever to wipe counters or other surfaces and dry your hands. Have a dedicated towel if you're using a hand towel to dry your hands. But if you don't want to waste paper towels or have to regularly get a new towel, one built-in option is to dry your hands on your clothes. If you wash your hands as often as I do, you end up with wet clothes. But drying your hands on your clothes doesn't present the issue a hand towel would, where it's being used and sitting wet and gathering bacteria. Mind you, if you do dry your hands on your clothes, make sure not to dry them on any surface of your clothes that have touched public surfaces. Like, don't dry your hands on your butt if you've been sitting in a public seat or transportation. But in general, a quick, easy way to dry your hands is on your clothes. But maybe you don't want that to be your regular practice. But do be careful about hand towels. If a towel is getting damp or it's been a day or two, switch it out for a clean one. Or have a couple there. It can help to just let them dry, but the germs will still be there. You've probably been hearing a lot of recommendations lately that are flawed or incomplete. I've seen and heard a lot of announcements urging people to use a tissue if you have to cough or sneeze and throw it away. That's important, but that's only 2/3 of the equation. The very critical third component is to wash your hands. As well, a tissue buffers the world from your sneeze, and to some extent buffers your hands. Tissues are porous, so there are almost certainly germs getting through to your hands. So, while it is important to use a tissue and throw it away, the very critical third step of that equation is to immediately wash your hands. And there are signs out there urging people to wear gloves. And that isn't necessarily a bad idea. But again, is not fully thought out, as if you're not being incredibly mindful, gloves have the same issue as your hands. If you're wearing gloves to protect yourself from germs on public surfaces, that can be an effective way to do so. However, if you touch an elevator button or a railing or such with gloves, and then touch your face or something, you'll have the same issue that you would have with your hands. And yes, of course, if you are potentially touching germy surfaces, you want to keep those germs off of your hands. But if you're using gloves to touch public surfaces, it's important to either change them or wash them. Because again, you're using them as you use your hands. So the same issue exists. And I don't think a lot of people think that through. But if you ever see like hospital shows or such, the surgeons get the gloves put on their hands and they don't touch anything because they need to keep those gloves clean. And you don't need latex type medical gloves either. Simple cloth gloves can act as a buffer between you and public surfaces. Unless you are doing something where you are in contact with a liquid or other otherwise think that germs will come through to your hands. A fleece winter glove or those cotton usher type gloves is fine to use as a way to protect your hands from germs on public surfaces. And if you think that you are going to have trouble not touching your face or such, it might help you to bring a few pairs of gloves and switch them out, clean them and rewear them later, or to simply use a shirt sleeve or something. Because that also is a good way to protect your hands from public surfaces, and you most likely would not be using a sleeve in the same way that you use your hands as you would with a glove. So if you use your sleeve on a button or railing or such, it's a way to keep the germs off your hands, but then free up your hands in case you can't help but scratch your face, etc. And this is my cat Belle helping me with my video. And being that a lot of people are concerned about germs amid the current crisis, many people want to wear masks to protect themselves from germs. But I think to begin with, and especially now, people are being urged to only wear masks if they would be particularly vulnerable or if they have another medical condition for which they would need to wear a mask. And that, of course, I'm referring to people who are trying to avoid the germs. But it is very important that anyone who is sick protect others from germs with a mask if they are around others. And it is really important, if you might be sick or are, to not go out. It is sad that basically the whole world has to be on lockdown because people who are sick are going around from place to place. And in some instances, people don't know. But if you have any inkling that you might be sick, don't go out in public places. Don't expose other people. And if you don't have anyone in your life who can go out to get things for you, then put the word out there, and almost certainly you can find someone who's willing to help. But in regards to masks, if you are afraid and want to protect yourself from breathing in germs, you have a right to do so. But if other people need masks, there are a plethora of creative ways that you can buffer yourself from germs. Maybe not to the same surgical type extent, but to put yourself in a lot safer and more comfortable situation than if you were just breathing the air and you were panicked about it. For one, a scarf. And this time of year, in the not so warm parts of the country or world, you could probably still get away with that even in usual circumstances without it really raising an eyebrow. But if you wanted a nice incognito way to cover your face, wearing a scarf around the bottom half of your face can help to do that. Also, there are numerous clever, creative ways you can come up with to do so. I mean, retrofit a motorcycle helmet or something if you're not concerned about conspicuousness. And with what's going on and people wearing masks and such, I think that there is a much higher threshold in that regard for people's concern about drawing attention to themselves. But I urge you not to be self-conscious. It's difficult as a germaphobe to find the right place between feeling like a spectacle and being so understated with what you're doing that you end up feeling uncomfortable. And sometimes just being upfront with someone can help to dispel any possible misperception and help to make you feel more at ease. And again, this is probably not something that would be so much of an issue with the current germ panic crisis that's going on out there. But if in the future you ever have germ concerns, be upfront with someone. Because if you don't tell someone that you are worried about germs, they might terribly misread the situation. There was something about 10 years ago that I still cringe to think about. I was meeting a professor who I was potentially going to be doing an independent study with, and I had one glove on and one glove off. And when he went to shake my hand, mind you, I've been uncomfortable with shaking hands for pretty much as long as I can remember. So, and while I've been able to get through it in interviews and such, I've always kind of been cringing inside thinking, when can I wash my hands? And maybe going forward, people won't expect people to shake hands, but not that someone would not potentially hold it against you, but you should feel free to say, I really don't like shaking hands, and that should not be held against you. And maybe going forward, that'll be the case. But anyway, so I switched hands to my gloved hand to shake this person's hand, and in retrospect, I feared that person could have thought that it was racism and not germophobia that was the motivation behind the gloved hand. And that pains me to this day. So if you are a germaphobe, any small percentage, being upfront about it can help to potentially avoid some terrible misunderstandings. But anyway, about the masks, if there are sick people who need masks, or people who are a lot more at risk, don't take the masks from them. Fashion your own, wear a scarf, or even wear a turtleneck and put it up over the bottom half of your face. Or if you can avoid it, don't go out. But remember, gloves have the same problems as your hands unless you are mindful to only use them on surfaces and remove them or wash them before using your hands to touch your face or eat or come in contact with someone else or any fixtures in your home, etc. And remember, and this should be a given, but when someone isn't right near a sink, they might not think of it. When you blow your nose or sneeze or cough into a tissue, after you dispose of the tissue, wash your hands thoroughly. Another option for sneezing, which may make you feel a little weird, but is, in my opinion, significantly less gross, is to put your shirt up over your head. Or the somewhat popular in recent times, but I may have come up with it before, a lot of people were suggesting it, to cough or sneeze into the crook of your arm. But unless you are really, really burying your face in your arm, it's not really giving complete sneeze coverage. So if you're in your home by yourself, then that may be fine. But if you're around other people, cover your sneeze completely, and if your hands are in any way involved, tissue or not, wash them. And just a note, breathing in germs is not the only way that you could catch something. So if there are a lot of germs out there right now and you're very concerned, if you have something that covers your face completely, you'd probably be a lot safer if you think that there is a high likelihood that you are exposed to something. So if you do have something that covers your eyes as well, or you want to wear sunglasses or such, it could help. I really don't know the likelihood of getting airborne germs through your eyes. I think that's usually by touch, but better to err on the side of caution. So if you are really concerned, find something to cover the bottom of your face or your whole head. If you have a hazmat suit, then maybe wear that, but maybe that's also something that is in high demand and short supply right now. So that is not a formal recommendation. But again, you know, there are ways you could come up with something. Heck, wear a giant inflatable costume. But there are clever ways to navigate a shortage of masks or the inherent problem with gloves and provide you some level of protection from germs. But again, the more you can stay away from germs entirely, the better. And that brings me on to the next topic, facial touching. Now, this is something that people don't think about often enough, that they are actually addressing with what's going on. But for some people, it might not be so easy to avoid touching your face. Unless you're a nail biter, it should be relatively easy to not touch your mouth. And you usually shouldn't have your hand up your nose to begin with. But it can be more difficult to avoid rubbing your eyes, especially if you have itchy or irritated eyes. So, while it's important to not touch your eyes with surfaces of your hands that you've been touching anything with. If you know what it's like to have an itch on your eye or nose and not be able to scratch it, that can be very difficult. So sometimes you might need to rub your eye, and there are ways to do so without putting yourself at the same risk. Now, mind you should not be touching your eyeballs to begin with, unless you're someone who is using contacts, and if you don't have the option to wear glasses or otherwise need to wear contacts, then you should always be washing your hands immediately before and after putting those in. But short of that, or something stuck in your eye, which you could also flush out with water, you should not be touching your eyeballs. But if you have an itch in your eye, there are ways to rub your eye without using your fingertips or the palm surface of your hand. You can rub with a knuckle, though still relatively close in that region. Rub with your wrist. Yes, this is still part of your hand, but not the part of your hand that you are using on surfaces. Unless, of course, like me, you find creative ways to open doorknobs and such. Or like my recommendation for sink handles, doorknobs, etc., you can use a sleeve. Please, not the same one. Be mindful of that. If you're using a sleeve on a knob, although maybe it's a different part of your arm, and you need to rub your eye, make sure it is a different part of your shirt, different sleeve, etc. But if you need to, rubbing your eye with your sleeve can be an effective way to deal with an irritated eye without touching your eyes with a germy part of your hand. Mind you, if you can avoid rubbing your eyes, they will probably be less irritated. But sometimes your eyes just bother you and you have to do something. So just be mindful not to touch any part of your face, really, with your fingertips or the palms of your hands. And in regards to germs out in public, the same goes for pollution, etc. When you get home, or even if you are out somewhere and have the ability to do so, wash your face. When you do so, make sure that you don't get the dirty water in your eyes or your mouth. Wash the germs off your face. And again, if you're washing up in the shower and you have been out in public, try not to get the dirty water from your hair or your face in your eyes or mouth. Probably not incredibly likely that would spread germs, but it's just a good way to avoid that, avoid any contamination. Like I said, grime, pollution, etc. And also, by not touching your facial orifices when you are interacting with other people or public surfaces, you're also protecting them from germs and from just grossness. And of course, as I said, it's important to always wash your hands, but don't eat with your hands either. Back as long ago as when I was in 9th grade, I remember eating my peanut butter and jelly using the baggie to hold it. And maybe that didn't look so conspicuous, but when I eat chips with bag in my hands, that a little bit more so. But don't eat with your hands, or for example, when I eat bread, I have to hold the bread, but I don't eat the part of the bread that I hold. So that also helps to avoid germs. And it may be hard for you to not touch your face, as people sometimes have idiosyncrasies where they may not even realize that they are rubbing their eyes, scratching their face, etc. Try to be mindful of that, and if you think that you may have touched your eyes or mouth with your hand, then immediately rinse it out. It will not necessarily completely protect you from any potential germs, but it's a good way to try to play offense if you might potentially have been exposed to something. And of course, if you are flushing your eyes with water, be careful. I don't want anybody getting hurt from my recommendation. Clean hands or a cup, lukewarm or cool water, flush your eyes out. And not that this is something that I would necessarily expect other people to do, but as a longtime germaphobe, I actually wash my mouth all the time. I have a plant-based dish soap, and I wash my mouth like I wash my hands, and it helps me to feel clean. So if that's something you feel you need to do, or you feel would make you more comfortable, then you can do that. But again, don't use chemical. The same brand of soap that I recommended that I use on my hands makes a dish soap, and it is all plant-based ingredients. Yes, it would not be safe to drink, but it is safe for dishes, and I've used it for a long time. And you might think I'm a wackadoo because I wash my own mouth out with soap, but it helps me to feel clean and safe in regards to concerns about things from the surrounding world. And another note in regards to touching your face. When they say nose, it means your nostrils. You're not going to catch something through the bridge of your nose. However, you could still catch something if you have your hands too close to a vulnerable part of your face. Household surfaces. It's generally not a bad idea to wipe down shared surfaces in your home, like keyboards, remotes, doorknobs, and light switches. And unless you have reason to believe that there is a virus on those surfaces, you really don't need to use a disinfectant to do so. I use Citrusol orange cleaner a lot of the time, or sometimes soap and water, and just intermittently clean things, or ask someone to wipe off a keyboard after they've been using it if you share a computer. It's smart to intermittently clean those kind of surfaces if you share a computer, etc. And as I might have touched on before, no pun intended, when it comes to doorknobs, don't touch your home doorknobs or interior doorknobs with the same surface that you touched public door handles with. And you should make sure that your doorknobs are clean, especially if people might not be washing their hands enough. But really, it's a combination of the two. Making sure that surfaces are cleaned intermittently or between different people using them, but also washing your hands after you use a shared surface, touch a doorknob, etc. And as I was saying before, when you use a sink, it's often a good idea to try to use an elbow or a wrist. But it's also good to make sure that the handles on the sinks in your home are clean. I'll intermittently clean my sink handles just by lathering my hands when I'm washing them, wiping the handles down and washing them again. I wouldn't recommend that for a shared sink necessarily, but if it's your personal sink. Otherwise, maybe with a paper towel or a clean towel. And for light switches, usually an elbow can do the trick, or even a shoulder, or a knee, though that's a little more difficult. We have the kind of flat switches in our house where it's really easy to turn them on or off. But for the finer switches, it might be a little more challenging, but not so much. You usually can still flick a switch up or down with an elbow. And phones. Shared phones are something that's really critical to make sure are clean. Many of you might not have a landline home telephone anymore, which is an issue in and of itself. It is smart to still have a non-cellular phone. But if there's any phone that's used by more than one person, you should make sure it's clean. Even with my high level of germ avoidance, I believe that I caught a respiratory flu because of my family phone. Now, I generally only use a phone on speaker, but a couple of years ago, when the phone was not working properly on speaker, I had to put it up against my ear. And I believe that's why I caught a respiratory flu. Is in spite of me rarely leaving my home, my parents were exposed to something. So that tells you, and makes it really scary, that even if you put a lot of focus into staying away from germs and people, you could still catch something. So it's scary and upsetting and unfair. And that's something that upsets me a lot too with what's going on, is that I don't feel safe even though I don't really go out around other people. I mean, I only left my house a few times this year. I'm only around a big group of people once every couple of years at a conference I go to. The biggest thing I generally go to is Library Jeopardy, which has 10 people or less. But anyway, so it's important to be germ conscious, but it still does not keep you entirely safe, which is upsetting, but important to know. But there are things like that which I think that I did deduce that was probably how I caught that respiratory flu, which also involved severe back and leg aches on my birthday. Anyway though, and I actually might be more vulnerable to germs because I leave my house so rarely. So that is the flip side about keeping yourself away from germs, is that if a germ does get near you, you might be more at risk. And that's not fair. But anyway, so make sure the phones are clean. Remotes, doorknobs, sink handles, and faucets if you have a movable faucet, light switches, thermostat knobs, etc. Window handles, any surface that not only you are touching, or if you do not constantly wash your hands, like I do. And one more thing regarding remotes. One neat trick regarding remotes. And I initially came up with this for hotel remotes, which are notoriously scarily germy. But you can do this with your home remote too. Take a large plastic zipper bag, put your remote in it, and your remote should function as it usually would. As long as a part of the bag that is not clear is not covering the sensor, or if it's sonic, then your remote should operate regularly and it kind of protects you from germs on it. Of course, you could still wipe it down, and of course, if you were to leave a bag on too long, you would inherently have the same issue, but you can switch the bag out, or if you're sharing the remote with other people, each have your own remote bag. Whatever works for you in that situation. But that's kind of a neat trick. These are the kind of things that I've come up with that I thought might be helpful to other people. I forgot to add that if you're highly concerned about the surfaces in your home, you can wipe things down with rubbing alcohol. And also, as an extension of facial touching, my gosh, please do not lick your fingers to turn pages or get schmutz off your kid's face or something. That's not good for either of you. And pages thing, that's just spreading germs for no reason. Anyway, the next subject is distancing. Social distancing is an obnoxiously millennial term that you are probably hearing practically everywhere right now. And while the term may be annoying, the concept is pretty important. It's always a good idea to keep space between you and other people in public places. And I'm never comfortable being too near to people. I'm somebody who likes to have a bubble of space around me, both for germ concerns and because I don't like people in my personal space. So, long before the pandemic, I would distance myself as much as possible from people in public settings. And whether or not it's amid a situation like this, if you don't like people super close to you, you should never be afraid to keep space around yourself out of concern for social niceties or whatnot. I mean, yeah, you don't want to be like, but, just keep your space. And, if someone gets too close, say, I really don't like people too close to me. Everyone is entitled to their own comfort zone of personal space around them. And even if you're in a place that is owned by someone else, the space around you is yours. And you have a right to have that space to yourself without someone infringing upon it. And that's just a general rule, not only in a crisis. As far as the whole social distancing thing goes, since the coronavirus is apparently highly contagious, lingers in the air, and can be transmitted from quite a distance, they initially were recommending people stay 6 feet apart, like the thing that the movie was recently based on. But now I think that they've extended it to 10. Apparently the 6 was not working very well. So, again, I think they're kind of flying by the seat of their pants with a lot of this. So I don't think they really know. They were telling people that 6 feet was a safe distance, but the fact that they upped it to 10 tells me that was apparently not accurate. But, if you are existing in a place where there are other people, sometimes it might not be possible to keep that much space between you and a single other person. I think that there are not a lot of people out in public places right now, but it still is hard, even with spatial confines, like in the aisle of a store. And I should note that it's important that you remember that not everyone out there is sick, or if someone coughs or sneezes, they don't necessarily have the coronavirus. My parents were recently at a store, and they said that a man started coughing and sneezing, and everyone was freaking out. And then his wife said, "No, it's allergies, it's allergies." And then he was ostracized outside. yes, it is important to be very cautious, but you also do not necessarily know the context of what's going on with someone. And I don't want misconceptions or fear in general to lead to people getting attacked or vilified. So yes, it is good to be very cautious, and even under usual circumstances, if I hear or see someone cough or sneeze in public, especially without covering, oh my goodness, I remember years ago seeing a little kid cough or sneeze in a store and his or her parent not even telling them to cover. And I thought to myself, this is the kind of stuff people need to be teaching their kids. But anyway, yes, I'm normally freaked out if there is coughing or sneezing near me. But if you're already that far away from someone and you also don't know what's going on, try not to make a huge stink out of it. And, not only because you don't know the full situation, but also out of self-protection, if you get involved in a kerfuffle, you're probably a lot more likely to put yourself at risk if the person is contagious. But anyway, that tangent aside, it's always a good idea to keep a distance from people in public places as much as you can. And with what's going on, it's a good idea to keep distance from other people in general, especially if the people who live in your house have not been going to all the same places or being around all the same people as you. But when it comes to your family or the people with whom you live, you probably need to calibrate the distancing within the realm of your own world, especially if you live in a small apartment or share a room with someone or something. Keeping 6 to 10 feet between you and someone else might not be feasible. And plus, it would probably make your home feel alienating and make things more unsettling and uncomfortable. So, while you should keep a distance from people in public places as much as possible and stay out of public places as much as possible right now, within your home, distance yourself from people, but don't be totally over the top. And if you're having a conversation with someone in your life or such, and you want to be at a distance where you're not like, hey, over there, you can have a conversation at a closer distance, but stagger yourself directionally so that you don't have to be concerned about potential germ droplets, which even without the current germ context is horrifying. But anyway, so here's a trick that I've developed as someone who doesn't like people near my face. If I'm talking to someone, I will often face forward or in a slightly different direction because that's what I'm comfortable with. Unless I'm at a distance where I feel like, no, they're not near me. So, and this might make people feel socially awkward sometimes. But any friend who I'm having a conversation with or something, I let them know, that I have some of these issues or whatnot. And if someone cares about you, they should be understanding about that. But, with what's going on right now, there's a totally different threshold as to what people perceive as weird. But anyway, so if you're talking with someone, you can alternate directions. You're talking to someone who's here, you can be facing this way, they can be facing that way. So you can be having a conversation and, kind of see each other, but you are not facing each other. So if somebody spits when they talk or such, exhales and there might be germs, it's not coming directly at your face, hopefully not coming at you at all. So that is a way to keep up conversations in your life without being too fearful. But again, with the people in your immediate life, you probably don't need to exhibit the same level of concern. But you also should not be totally cavalier because, like I said, different people could have been around different people. I mean, for me, I'm basically a recluse. I normally barely leave my home. But if my parents go out to the store, they're around people and then they come home by me. That concerns me a lot. But, anybody, even if you are not so reclusive, anybody who's been around anybody else, even if you have not been directly at risk from someone out there, you could be by proxy. So again, don't be super close to people in general. But when it comes to your family and such, keep that within reason. Like I said, if you live with other people, you probably don't want to be rooms apart and feeling totally alienated and alone amid what's going on. You want to have some kind of community with the people in your life. You want to be able to talk with them and not feel like you are on this strange alien planet. So, work within your comfort zone. If you want to leave a room distance between you, then do that. But if you don't, then just keep a reasonable amount of space around you. And amid this frightening and emotionally distressing time, you probably need a hug. So, don't totally fear your family if you need emotional support. Avoid close interaction with others as much as possible. I think the fact that Italy is so much of a hugging and kissing culture is probably why they got hit so hard. So you do need to be very cautious. But, if you are in emotional distress and you need a hug from your parent, sibling, child, significant other, hopefully that shouldn't put you at too much risk. If you're hugging someone, keep your face to one side and theirs to the other. Don't get super close to where they're breathing. But don't feel like you have to be in this totally alone either. You kind of have to find the right balance of germ safety and protecting your mental well-being. So don't isolate yourself from everyone completely. Talk to people online, although I have noticed that people are really quick to jump on people online amid this, more so than usual even. Talk to friends or relatives online or through video chat or on the phone. A wiped off clean phone or a phone that's all your own. Talk to the people in your home at a slightly greater distance than usual. And if you need emotional support, like a hug, hopefully that will not put you at too much risk. I don't think you should spend a great deal of time in close proximity to others, but like I said, if you're feeling emotionally distressed, then sometimes a hug from a loved one can help you through that. Anyway though, in general, try to keep a significant distance from people and try to stay away from strangers in public places as much as possible. I do not like the idea that I don't like the fact that people are trying to make orders that people stay at home, but I think that the recommendation to stay at home is sound and that you should stay out of public places as much as possible and away from other people as much as possible. I don't like the idea that people might try to force people to stay imprisoned in their homes or try to invoke martial law. That is very scary, but staying at home is a good idea, and if it is feasible for you, you should do so. And absolutely, if you are sick or think you could be sick, think you have been around anyone who might be, do not expose other people. Because while if you're healthy, it should be your option to go somewhere if you need to. If you're sick, it's not just about you. It's affecting everyone you're around. And for people like me who live in a rural area, I have a nice yard and I can walk around outside and such. And that's really nice. But for some people who are cooped up in apartments, I imagine they're probably going a little stir crazy. And I will try to address ideas for fighting boredom either later in this video or more likely in another video. But I think it is kind of scary for a lot of people being confined to their homes if that's not what they're used to. And even for me, as somebody who is a homebody who barely ever leaves, the idea that I can't really leave makes me panic a little bit. But like I said, I'm able to go outside. If you can't, then hopefully you can find some place that is calming in your home and not be feeling too stir crazy or suffocated. And if you are someone who lives in close spaces with other people, such as having a roommate or such, and you are in very close quarters, then it is more concerning for you, I think, and try to keep space as much as possible, or if you have somewhere else you can stay, or if they have somewhere else they can stay, or if you're somewhere where there's someone to whom you can express your concerns and see if there's another space you can occupy. I think everyone's situation is different. This is particularly dangerous and probably frightening for people who, either due to circumstances or against their will, are living in a confined space with others. So that is a whole other scary situation. And I really don't have a lot of advice for people in those situations, though I don't know how many people in a situation like that would be seeing my video. But if anybody has particular concerns or questions about ideas regarding something specific in their life or living situation in regards to germ avoidance, then feel free to leave me a comment or contact me to ask, and I will try to come up with ideas or advice for you. And this girl apparently comes by me to do my video now. If you have to be out and about, when you get home from somewhere, you can reduce the transference of public contamination by changing your clothes before you sit on any of the furniture in your home. Ideally, taking a shower and then changing into other clothes. And wipe down any objects that you had with you in public, or if you have a purse or something that you might have placed down somewhere, you might not want to bring it into your house. Or better yet, just be mindful not to put bags, wallets, etc. down on any public surfaces. Also, clean any surfaces you may have touched in an automobile, seat belts, steering wheel, door handles, etc., unless you are mindful to only touch them with freshly washed hands. And wipe down the fixtures you may have touched entering your home, unless, again, you were using a clean sleeve, freshly washed hands, or something else that did not have any public contamination on it and would not remain on the doorknob or transfer further into your house. And one thing that I think is a major concern that I had not seen any focus being paid to until a few days ago, I saw some mention of it, is cell phones. If you have a cell phone, which, mind you, not everyone does. I am not a fan of cell phones. But if you have a cell phone or other mobile device that you're using in public, that can have a lot of germs. Not only if it's something you're putting up to your face, but all the touching on the screen. If you've ever seen the screen of a touch screen device, when it's off or the light catches it the wrong way, you see tons of fingerprints. So imagine that with germs. So you should clean the screen and every other part of the device that you touch or hold off regularly, or at least when you get home. As if you're using that when you're out, and especially if you are not really careful to not touch anything or anyone, you are bringing those germs into your home on that phone. And then if you make a call, putting the germs right up by your face. So be really careful with cell phones and clean them regularly. Or if you want, you could probably put a smartphone in a little sandwich baggie and use the screen through there when you're out and just take it out when you get home. So that's an idea too. And like I said with the gloves, if you want, you could bring a few baggies and intermittently switch it out. And this wouldn't require cleaning your phone, but would allow you to change the surface of it intermittently if you're somewhere for a while and concerned, without it being a big ordeal. And I've not tried this with a cell phone in particular, but touch screens do work through clear plastic bags. And again, cell phones have a lot of fingerprints and would regularly be a germ concern. So amidst a pandemic or any kind of major epidemic outbreak situation, be especially mindful to clean cell phones off if you are going to be holding them, touching the screen, swiping throughout the day. So remember, as much as you want to stay connected, unless you are fastidiously wiping down the screen, when it comes to germs, cell phones are not your friend. So be mindful to pretty frequently clean a phone screen and the phone body, not just the front surface, and or put something around it that you remove. And of course, germs are not only out there in the world. So if you are concerned right now or in general, you can clean your phone off at home too. But the major concern is if you are out and might have touched something in public or someone, and then you are spreading that to your phone, and then your phone to you. As much as cell phones have become an extension of a lot of people's beings, they can hurt you if you're not mindful to disinfect them. Many of you are probably going hand sanitizer crazy amid this crisis. And while hand sanitizer is a way to sanitize your hands when you're away from a source of water, it's not without its flaws. When I was in school, I used to apply hand sanitizer so much that I have a slimy coating of it on my hands. And for one, that's unpleasant, but it also might negate the effectiveness of it. Also, it was recently brought to my attention by someone's post that some people are allergic to hand sanitizer. So be mindful of that if you're using hand sanitizer around other people or where you might be touching things in a public place. And while hand sanitizer is a way to clean your hands when you're not able to wash them, it shouldn't be used in lieu of washing your hands. And if you're going to be out somewhere for a long period of time and not have access to a sink, you could actually bring your own source of water. I always bring my own soap when I go out places because sadly there isn't animal-free soap a lot of places you go. But often when I go out, I will also bring a container of water so that I can wash my hands if I'm not near a sink. And that's kind of a safety blanket for me and enables me to wash my hands even if there isn't a sink around. I've often used a plastic zipper bag to transport water, but those are not always liquid tight. So I've had big water leak problems sometimes. Another option would be to bring a beverage container filled with water, whether it's a water bottle or a cleaned out juice container or such. But for that, you need to have somewhere you can pour the water, like if you're in a parking lot or, on the grass or something. So that is the one upside to using the plastic zipper bag instead, is that if you're somewhere where you can't be pouring water, it allows you to wash your hands and zip the bag back up. Of course, if you wash your hands in there once that way, the water is no longer clean. But if it's more just a need to wash your hands frequently and not that you actually think your hands are dirty, then you can use the same water like that a few times. But if you do have reason to think your hands are dirty, then that's a one-time use plan. But as I said, carrying a plastic zipper bag with water is not without issues. Especially if it's overfull, they can leak. But if you fill, I get like the large gallon size bags. If you fill it part way, and if you put another one around it or put it in something else, then you don't have as much of a problem. But if you're carrying around big full bags of water, then sometimes it may leak on your lap and make it look like you peed yourself or something. So you don't want that. But I like to bring my own hand washing kit when I go places, so I always have the ability to wash my hands if I need to. So that is an idea that I wanted to share. And as far as hand sanitizers go, there are not any I'd particularly recommend offhand, since I usually just do my mobile hand washing thing. I haven't gotten hand sanitizer in a while. I know that there are a couple of cruelty-free brands, and I would urge you to, for soap and hand sanitizer, only get things free of animal ingredients and free of animal testing. There is one that I've gotten through one of the online vegan stores before that I believe is called All Terrain. That's the gel style hand sanitizer. And then there's one that I think is called Cleanwell that is a spray. And a spray would circumvent the slimy buildup issue. But I remember that smells really medicinal. I used it to clean off my desk in one of the classes I was in several years ago, and this woman in the class would stare daggers at me because she hated the smell. So sometimes that's difficult too when you have issues and other people have different issues and you're kind of impacting each other without realizing it. But anyway though, and that's another thing, if you're just washing your hands instead of using something chemically, it would prevent a scenario like that. But anyway, so like I said, hand sanitizer can be helpful if you are away from a source of water and need to clean your hands. But I like to have a makeshift hand washing kit with me wherever I go. And it's kind of over glorifying it. It's just, I bring my own soap and I have water. Those are two different ways to clean your hands if you're away from running water. I forgot to include that you can avoid germs and bacteria on your toothbrush by cleaning it between uses. I wash my toothbrush with dish soap, but you could also run it under boiling water like you see on the opening credits on the TV show Monk. Now, to dispel a dangerous rumor, I was really upset to read that some people out there were considering harming their pets because they were afraid they'd catch the coronavirus from them. not only are your pets your family and you should protect them, but while this virus came from another species to begin with, it hasn't been affecting people's companion animals. And logically, your pets have not been out congregating with groups of humans. So if anything, you're more of a risk to them than they are to you. But if you're not sick, then you don't pose a risk to them. The CDC said that if you are sick and you have someone else who can care for your companion animals, that's optimal. But if you don't, and can't enlist someone's help without potentially endangering them, etc., try to keep as much distance from your pets as possible while caring for them when you're not well. But for those of you who are healthy and homebound right now, this is a great chance to spend some extra time with your pets. For people who usually work long office hours and such, whose dogs or cats or other companion animals may be home for hours and hours without them, they are probably so thrilled to have you around. So give them extra cuddle time, play with them, hang out with them. This is a great chance to spend lots of extra time hanging out with your pets. I even read somewhere that some people are suggesting that people consider taking in a foster animal while they're on this sort of lockdown, especially if you're someone who may not live with other humans or have companion animals in your life right now. Of course, the catch-22 about that is that usually if you're fostering an animal, you, at the very least, have to meet someone at the time when the animal is being brought to you or you're picking them up. If not a myriad of interviews and inspections and such, which not everyone requires that. And I personally have issues with people wanting to come in and inspect your home. But if you are someone who has time right now by yourself and has love to give a companion animal, you might want to consider looking into fostering possibilities. Or probably even people who are sick need someone to care for their animals. I imagine it would probably be a good idea to bathe them first if they were coming from an environment where someone was sick into a home where people aren't. But that's something to think about too. It just dawned on me that there are people's companion animals that are probably left without their caregivers if people are hospitalized and such, and that's very concerning. So that might be an area in which help is imminently needed. But also, if you know anyone who is sick or who you think might not be home with their animal for a duration during what's going on, then try to follow up on it, because I don't want any animals to be abandoned without caregivers amid this crisis. Anyway, you don't have to be afraid of your pets or other animals you may encounter. Right now in the US, to my knowledge, this virus is only being spread among humans. And like I said, if anything, if you're infected, you might be a danger to other species, but it's almost certainly not going to randomly appear in companion animals in someone's home or in the surrounding area. So don't fear other animals, and in fact, since you can't get near humans right now without having to be really paranoid about breathing the air and such, I think it's a great time to spend time with animals in your family, or talking to the animals outside if you live in a rural area like I do. So, that's one thing that you can do to enrich the lives of others at the same time as taking in the beauty of the world around you and or enjoying extra cuddle time with your pets. Just a few additional notes on some topics. In regards to hand washing, if you use bar soap, I'm not entirely certain that germs wouldn't remain on the surface. So if you're using a bar soap, you might want to wash the soap off between uses or scrape the outer layer off. And if you use a bottled hand soap, try to use the soap pump with your wrist and or wash it off between uses. And germ awareness yourself doesn't always mean that you're thinking about the potential impact you might have on other people. So try to be mindful of how you conduct yourself around others too. Because while your main focus might be, I have to make sure that my hands and my airspace stays clean, try to help other people have the same if they may have concerns about you or other people in general. And I wanted to make some additional notes on the topic of masks, because over the course of days and the time that I've been making this video, the things that are being said on TV have changed. I don't think that they're necessarily taking into account availability and need in the recommendations that they're giving. So that is something that is also part of the equation and should also be part of your consideration in the situation. I also wanted to say that I came up with a suggestion about scarves on my own, and I'm not saying that they would necessarily afford you the same protection as a mask would, and I still wonder about masks. I mean, I imagine that they keep the horrifying droplets out that are the biggest risk, but if you are able to breathe in air and it's airborne, I still don't think you're entirely safe. And they did actually say something I did hear. I've not been spending a lot of time listening to news on the TV. I think to some extent it can be really detrimental, putting people in a further state of fear and panic, and therefore not good for your mental or emotional well-being during this crisis. So it's good to stay informed, but not to spend hours in front of the TV listening to negative reports and getting further stressed out. The main thing is to be taking the precautions that you should. And as long as that's the case, you don't need to be watching for constant updates. You know, intermittently check in, you know, see if there's anything important you need to find out, but don't while your life away watching a death toll click up and fearing that it's the apocalypse, because all that serves to do is put you in a state of panic and despair. But that tangential note aside, I did hear them mention about, you know, mask doesn't protect your eyes, so I stand by my maybe you want to wear sunglasses suggestion, although people with glasses can still reach up and rub their eyes, so I think you would be a little bit more aware, but you know, maybe even ski goggles or something. You know, make your own makeshift thing. But anyway, my suggestion about scarves doesn't mean that it would necessarily keep you entirely safe, but if you're looking for a more incognito look, or if you do not have masks available to you, or there are other people who need them more, then that is a possible alternative. Or just not going out. That's the best bet. Don't go out. But if you have to go out somewhere and you need or want to wear protective gear, you could probably rig something up yourself. It is still a concern, whether they're saying so or not, that masks may be hard to come by for people who really need them. And while people who are healthy definitely deserve to be able to protect themselves from germs and feel safe, it is really crucial that anybody who may be sick is wearing a mask if they're around other people, which they shouldn't be to begin with, but so that they are not endangering others. But remember, there are people who have leukemia, immune disorders, etc., who may need masks normally or be particularly vulnerable in this situation and especially need a mask compared to others. So it's not that everybody doesn't deserve to be protected from germs, but if you have an opportunity to get a mask or have a mask, try to take into consideration if there is a high demand and other people who may be more at risk. And if that's the case, perhaps rig something up yourself. I mean, you know, I'm trying to think of creative ideas here. Like, what about beekeeper suits? Not that I support beekeeping, but I think that they have an open screen, but you could probably rig something up, or scuba gear, you know, any number of things you could jury rig to possibly come up with a germ protective getup if you have to be around people and you're concerned. And I mean, you know, there might still be people, medical workers and such, who don't have masks, and that's really bad. And I've heard that medical workers are getting sick and such, and to me, that doesn't make sense unless they and the equipment available is spread so thin that they are not getting sufficient protective gear. I mean, everybody who's working with people who are infected should have one of those full-on CDC suits, but I imagine that's seldom the case. And that's not fair, and it is unacceptable that there are people putting their lives at risk who aren't getting proper safety wear so that they don't also get sick. So If there remains a shortage of masks, it's crucial that people who are working with sick people or live with sick people or have an immune disorder or such themselves get masks. So don't be scoffing them up. I saw a picture on the internet of someone with their dog with a mask. To my knowledge, dogs are not at a particular risk right now, and you don't have to have your dog out around other people. But anyway, the equipment and supply shortage is concerning in general. I've been hearing a lot about how they are really short on ventilators or respirators. Not sure if that's synonymous, but that is unacceptable. And I'm wondering if people are dying because they are being taken off of machines because there are not enough for other people. And if so, that is absolutely unacceptable. This whole thing is unacceptable. And that brings me to my last topic. How any disease starts, I don't know. But from what I've heard, the coronavirus first jumped species, starting a worldwide human epidemic at a place where animals are harmed. And it is unacceptable that places like that exist in the first place. It is heinous and horrible that innocent creatures are exploited and harmed. So I ask you to stand up against quote-unquote animal agriculture and get places like that shut down and help protect the innocent across the board. And in doing so, prevent something like this from ever happening again. And perpetuation of this virus has happened to the extent and magnitude that it has, largely because of lack of hygiene and people spending way too much time closely surrounded by way too many other people. So not only now, but going forward, try to put great focus on personal hygiene, like regularly and thoroughly washing your hands, and try not to be too close to where other people are breathing or talking. I get that in some situations that may be more difficult than others, but try to create a bubble around you. It can help protect you, it can help protect others, and it can help prevent a myriad of contagious illnesses from spreading, affecting you, your family or friends, and anyone else. This is a scary time for most everyone, but especially for those of us who are normally afraid of catching something from other people. And distressingly, you can never be completely safe from germs. But staying away from people who might be sick, protecting your airspace, and putting focus on hygiene will greatly help to protect you. This is the scariest and most widespread medical crisis in most of our lifetimes. But whether a longtime germaphobe or the newly germ-conscious, try to stay calm and optimistic, and hopefully we'll get through this all right.